Fish Wars was a series of protests spanning between the 1960s and 70s that included protests known as fish-ins, where Native nations in Washington fought to force the state to uphold treaties which guarantee Native rights to fish in usual and customary fishing sites outside of tribal borders. While most protests remained peaceful, many were faced with violence from police. During what started as a peaceful fishing encampment on the banks of the Puyallup River, soon led to over 60 arrests and a burned railroad bridge. Puyallup tribal elder Ramona Bennett was at the Puyallup River riot and recalls the police violence well, stating that, and they just came down on us, and they came with gas masks in regards to police storming the encampment. Ramona Bennett would later go on to be elected as Puyallup tribal chairwoman in 1971. Leave me alone, goddammit. I fish here. I live here. Billy Frank Jr. was one of, if not the most influential activist for Native fishing rights during the 1960s, 70s, and far beyond. He spent years fighting for the rights of Native fishers to be able to fish in their usual and accustomed spots. His work and dedication to leading fish-ins has cemented him as a Nisqually tribal legend. The Bolt decision and further backlash. On February 12, 1974, Judge George Bolt sided with Native tribes as he affirmed tribal nations reserved treaty rights to fish. The trial was long and grueling, lasting over 3 weeks straight with no breaks for Labor Day weekend. The decision confirmed Native rights to fish in common with other sports fishermen and commercial fishermen. They were also affirmed rights to half of the salmon catch. Backlash came quick. Many sport and commercial fishermen couldn't understand why the Bolt decision was necessary. In an interview we did with the lifetime fisherman Jim Bogmart, he felt that the Bolt decision actually separated fishermen, saying the judge separated them. The court decision caused the split and caused selective fishing between everyone. Many other commercial and sport fishermen took a more active stance against the decision, specifically Judge Bolt himself. Outside the Tacoma courthouse, Judge Bolt was hung in effigy.
Actions of great consequence occurred, some of which were boat rammings, gunshots, and even deaths and hospitalizations. To the non tribal fishermen, fishing was a way of life, an occupation passed through generations of family. It was a crucial part of their financial and communal stability. Many believe that Judge Bolt was separating and dividing people instead of building a better community and keeping peace between the non tribal and tribal citizens. Non tribal fisherman Jim Bumgart of Whatcom County illustrated that the court decision was based on the quote, in common with, meaning that many fishermen would have to fish together and share everything. He believed that the decision showed equity rather than equality. The tribal fishermen had less resources and access to equipment than the non tribal fishermen, and most state fisheries were owned by white male fishermen. If you weren't part of the 1/8 of the listed treaty tribes, or if you were a minority of a different race, you didn't have the right to fish. The Bolt decision took a bit of time to become fully implemented into everyone's daily lives. Native Americans had to grow their own businesses, which took time. Many new systems were put in place, like strict time limits to fish and a limited amount of fish runs. Eventually, more gear than fish were used in the rivers of the Pacific Northwest. Fish runs depleted majorly, and now fishermen struggled to get 50% of the fish that they were promised through the Bolt decision. Another fisherman named Pete Granger spoke about how fishing used to be more habitual and common in schools and in our communities, but now it is rarely talked about or done. The fish wars were covered by many journalists and newspapers. Pete Granger stated that the tribes had been affected by Martin Luther King Jr. and by the achievements he made in the Civil Rights Act and those laws that were enacted in the late 60s and 70s. And so I think by a large amount, there was a bias towards support for the tribal cause. On top of that, the media was very hard to trust at the time because there were many exaggerated stories and false rumors about the fish wars. During the interview, Pete Granger spoke about how he fished with the Lummi regularly and understood what they were capable of. He knew that the system was stacked against them and that they had to take action upon it.
Fishing is a gift given to us by the Creator. a practice that tribes have been taking part in since time immemorial. For centuries, native ancestors fished the rivers without ever being told their presence was illegal. Then the white man came and created treaties placing restrictions on how natives could fish. Heather Jefferson, a Lummi tribal member, says fish wars were not a fight for profit. It was a model of how to maintain their identity and to pass on what they were given to the next generation with integrity. Billy Frank Jr., perhaps the most known figure to come from fish wars, was born on March in 1931. Billy grew up fishing on the Nisqually River near Frank's Landing. His love of fishing led to his first arrest when he was 14 for quote-unquote illegal fishing on his native land. He would become one of the leaders of the fish-ins during the 60s and 70s. After his first arrest, he would be arrested over 50 more times in his life. Frank Jr. was a dominant organizer for fish-ins over the years. When the Bolt decision passed, it was a tremendous win for tribal fishers. When it decided that treaties were supreme law of the land and overruled state law. Billy Frank Jr. spent his whole life advocating for fishing rights. Even in death, his life and legacy lives on. His teachings live on in next generations. He was fearless and steadfast in protecting our way of life, and that's something that always needs to be remembered. Even now, Native people still face violence from trying to fish on their homeland. Native fisher Rebecca Padilla recalls a time where her nets were cut while trying to gill-net fish. They just kept coming. They told us we shouldn't be fishing, and then when we wouldn't leave, they would go on their boats and cut our net. We didn't gain 50%, we lost 50%, was the response of Heather Jefferson. Her father was involved in tribal matters, being a tribal council member who worked closely with Billy Frank Jr. She spoke about being in awe of all the different tribes coming together to be serious about the matter, but also love and respect each other. They were brothers. Nothing was expected, but everything was given. They relied on each other because at the end of the day, they were all fighting for the same thing, their inherent right to fish.
Around 50 years after the war had concluded, the struggle for more resources in Washington state veered its course from the original debate. Now those involved in the conflict competed not over who got the fish, but rather if there were enough resources left in the river to catch. Commercial and sport fishing industries began to decline as 50% of their fishing population went to the treaty tribes. Jobs dwindled in the fishing industry due to expenses outweighing the amount of fish caught. As prices grew, more permits became in place, and regulations gave way to higher expectations. Currently, recreational fishing supplies tons of jobs in the community and creates billions of dollars in revenue. On the other side of job increase, non-tribal and tribal communities have supplied over 10,000 jobs just to help restore the salmon population back to its original river and size. Washington state has taken many actions to help fight against the changing climate and populations of fish. For example, there was a net pen ban on farmed fishing industries to save wild salmon from these invasive species. The fish in the pens contained loads of contaminants, PCBs, which link to diseases like cancer, dyes and colorants to add color to the salmon, and antibiotics to stop the spread of disease in crowded, dirty pens. Specifically in Whatcom County, students and community members are encouraged to join work parties with groups like the NSEA, which plants native trees and plants near salmon habitats, takes wood debris and puts invasive plants on top of them into structures and allows them to die out and not grow back. Many schools have projects like hatching salmon to allow students to learn more about what they do for the environment. Later, they will release them back into the wild with a conservationist group and help the rivers in Whatcom County. The fish wars have impacted Washington state and communities in so many ways. Billy Frank Jr. once said that the fish war isn't over. Instead of fighting over fish, we are fighting for the fish, to keep them on this planet. As we leave you today, we encourage you to ponder how you can help the Pacific Northwest in its road to recovery and save the environment that shaped our state.